Hey friends, this is World Maker Books again. Back with EarthSong Overture by Mark Wandry. We're starting to get into the thick of it now. It's starting to get really exciting. I didn't want to stop reading last night because it was night before last because it was getting kind of crazy, and it was cool. And that's what I know for right now. Trying to get my Kindle to open. We have a few more days to deal with old half-dead computer, but many thanks to the friend who provided it for us, because it kept me from having to buy a new one for over a year now. So super thanks to Frank, and it's made a big difference in our life. So yay, thank you. New one's been ordered. It's on the way. Ended up getting a mini tower instead of a tiny little box, just because I could get so much more useful speed and processing capability in the tower than I was able to in the small format. So it's all good. It's chilly here today. Got up to about 50, and I don't know what it's going down to. 40 something, maybe, probably. I don't know. Let's look. It's 49 now, which is about as warm as it got today. Oh, it's going all the way down to 48. Yeah, 52 high, 47 low today. About the same tomorrow, 56, 43. So not too bad. I had some more money come in from another toy sale, so I have been looking over on Etsy and finding some cute patterns. Wait until you guys see the super cute little Santa Claus pattern that I got. If you're a fan of the old Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and those Frosty the Snowman movies, you're going to like it. And of course, we have to start with our espresso beans. I'm going to have to get somebody that lives where there's a Buc-ee's to send me more espresso beans before too long. I got something different to fidget with today, so maybe it'll be a little less annoying. Because I just fidget. I can knit or I can fidget, but I can't read and knit well at the same time. So hopefully we'll have a few people on here. We're going to wait until about 5 minutes after 8 to really get going. In the meantime, I can show you what I'm working on. This is going to be a really pretty Christmas stocking. Look at that. There's another section just like this after I finish this red section. And then I suspect we'll be into the heel. One of my cousin's children commissioned me to make a Baby Yoda for her little brother. So here's Baby Yoda. And his robe is just in need of sleeves at this point. But because it's going to a little boy, who I know the first thing he's going to do is take the clothes off, I gave him a cute little butt. Because, I knew Max would appreciate it. Being family and only being 12, of course, Adelaide gets quite the discount on work that she wants. But she's nice enough to not abuse that privilege. So I do need to get off my rear and get the instrument case made for her dad. Problem is, I'm not quite sure really how to go about it. But I need to do it really soon. So we'll see how that goes. Today's mostly been doing laundry. Let's see if I can find the little Santa and share the screen real quick. Oh, here we go. I forgot about the dinosaur too. Let's see. Oh, can't share screen this way. Okay, that's all right. Anyway, a really cute little dinosaur with a candy cane and a Santa hat, and a super cute Santa. I'm excited to carve out a few minutes to get to working on them, but I've got other things. I probably won't get to them until almost Christmas because I've got other things I need to do in the meantime. Like gifts for the little kids in my family. And I have to get all those done as soon as I humanly can. Because they have to get in the mail. So I also have to finish a cool secret project for Joel Lyons. And it's probably almost halfway done. But as of tonight, it becomes a priority because I want to be able to deliver it on the 17th while I'm up in his neck of the woods. So that would be good to get that done. I have 3 bodies, 2 arms, 2 legs. I need 4 more arms and 4 more legs, and I need 3 heads. And then I need coats and probably weapons. So I got my work cut out for me in the next few days. Three more minutes. Hopefully the computer won't freeze up like it did last time. Everything else is turned off. So cross your fingers. Hopefully I won't yawn too much. Doing the coffee beans proactively this time. Don't know what else to say. Finally starting to mostly feel better. Coffee beans. Chocolate covered espresso beans. Is there another bag in the fridge still? Oh, good. Good. See, we thought ahead. Bought extra the last time we were through there. I think this putty was supposed to like change color when it got warm, but it doesn't anymore. It's been sitting in the drawer for probably 2 years. But it gives me something to fidget with that's a little less annoying. Did you pull it up already, Mark? The video? Oh, there we go. I was just trying to figure out who the one person it was showing me was on here was. Don't mind my hair, you guys.
I've seen 4 people commenting and it says 1 person watching.
Gotcha. All right. We're a minute early, but I'm going to go ahead and start anyway. All right. So when we stopped, Mindy had just told Lisa that she'd figured out where they were on Bellatrix. And Lisa was like, oh, cool. So what was the exciting meeting about? All right. And that was the chapter break. Mindy's high continued well into the afternoon when she returned to her desk in the trailer. The women were excited to hear her news, even if they really didn't understand what it meant. She'd used a whiteboard to draw a picture of the Orion Nebula, then shifted perspectives to demonstrate how she extrapolated the data to figure out that the world was around Bellatrix. When she turned to look at them, she saw the blank stares people got from attending a lecture that went completely over their heads. Still, they all smiled and applauded. An hour later, when the NSA guard came to escort them back to the hotel, Skinner appeared and asked her to stay. She thought she knew what it meant. You did a good job, he said. I turned the data over to the astronomy group at NASA. You embarrassed the shit out of them. The department head tried to resign. Why? Because you did by yourself in just days what they couldn't do with all the administration's resources in weeks. They're being ridiculous, she said, and he nodded in agreement. Bureaucracies have their disadvantages. She was thinking about the computer files she'd been examining. Still, he said, we owe you. What do you want? In on the project. You already are. No, she said, really in. He looked at her as if it was the first time they'd met, like she hadn't known him for years. I'll talk to them, he said. We'll think about it. Skinner turned to leave. Who's them? Mindy asked. He paused for a second. I can't tell you that, he said. Then he left. An NSA agent was waiting outside. He gestured for Mindy to follow him. As they walked out of the compound toward the hotel, she understood that staring through the portal was as close as she was likely going to get to the other world. But she couldn't stop thinking about Bellatrix, only a few degrees off from Betelgeuse. 5 years ago, a signal from Betelgeuse ended her career as an astronomer. Did coincidences like this actually happen? She didn't know. There's the end of a chapter break. Chapter 18, May 8th. Assistant Director Mark Volant set the paper down and looked up. On the screen, his boss considered the information. And you believe this portal leads to a planet 250 light years away? The man asked. Volant ground his teeth to take his mind off the pain in his arm. He had decided not to take another hydrocodone until after the meeting, and now he regretted that decision. It felt like someone was slowly drilling into his wrist with one of those hand-cranked tools. Yeah, Volant replied, I do. If you heard those sloth things yourself and looked through the portal, you would too. Special effects are pretty advanced, the other man said. If anyone could pull it off, NASA could. It's too much, Volant said. Too much and too complex. I've seen some impressive illusions over the years. This is real. So that means you believe the alien bullshit too. It wasn't a question. I haven't seen that with my eyes, he said, but who else could make a 1 gigaton bomb? Maybe the Russians, the other man grumbled. Volant snorted, yeah, fine, you're right. The director looked aside, and Volant had the feeling someone else was with him, watching the meeting. He didn't ask, though, as it was none of his business who the boss took into his confidence. What do you advise? Proceed with Project Bifrost. The boss looked away from the camera again. There's always Excalibur, the director added after a few moments. You read the briefing. Right, the director said. We'll review it and get back to you within 48 hours. What about the eggheads? Volant asked. They want to send through more men and equipment. We can send 144, right? That's what they think. The lights go out as people go across. If we stop them, NASA will get suspicious. Agreed. Don't stop them. The files we intercepted suggest they only plan to transition a couple more people over the next 2 days. Volant nodded. Increased security. It looks like everything might hinge on you. Understood, Volant said, and severed the connection. He looked at his watch. It was nearly 5 a.m. He opened the laptop again. He had more meetings to attend and arrangements to make. Chapter break. Despite completing her task, it didn't revoke Mindy's portal access card, and Mindy walked to the dome the next morning after her escort delivered her to the compound. The portal was already active, and, judging by the partially empty pallet near the portal, someone had just gone through, and more probably would later. She wandered over to the dais and found the same young man marking items off the list on his computer. She'd been hoping for that. Hi, she said. He glanced over, and when he realized it was Mindy, a huge smile broke his features. Hi, yourself! I heard you found the planet over there, he said. Yep. Astronomy isn't my thing, he admitted. I had to look it up. Only 250 light years away, it's practically our neighbor. She nodded in agreement. With that done, what are you going to do as an encore? I'm kind of between jobs, she admitted, a slightly downcast look on her face. She hoped she looked convincing. Her previous boyfriend had said she wasn't a good actor. My last job, when I lived in Portland, was in logistics. I could put in a word for you in my department, he said. She could tell by the expression on his face he thought that was a stellar idea. You'd do that? Sure, he said. We have our hands full organizing all the stuff in the warehouse. Lisa, over on Bellatrix, waved when she saw Mindy, who waved back. It would be fun to work with you, he said. I'm sure it would, Mindy thought as she grinned to herself. Her little side project just got a lot simpler. Back at her desk, Mindy spent the day correlating the observational data against the astronomical data from star records. Now that she was sure the star was Bellatrix, she was able to fine-tune the results. It was becoming clear why NASA couldn't make a match. They worked in strict precision out to several decimal places. The data she collected was slightly off, by less than 2% overall, but still off. Only not all of the star fixes were off. That was curious to her, and she didn't want to let it go. NASA was right about many things, and where stars should be was one of them. After a lunch of not quite fresh sandwiches from a local deli, one of the project coordinators visited her and presented her with a new pass. There was no ceremony. He just took her old pass and gave her a new one. She worried it wouldn't have the dome symbol, but when she looked, the symbol was still there. In fact, this ID looked identical to the old one, only the code was different. "What's this?" she asked the harried-looking man. "They assigned you duties in transition logistics," he explained, "since you don't have as much stargazing to do." "I'm trying to work out the details of my observations," she said. "Can I keep working on that, too?" "If you take care of your other responsibilities, I don't care," he said, and left. Samantha and Alexis beamed and welcomed her. They all worked in the same group now. During the afternoon, she had a chance to inquire about the two women's lives. She carefully worked some personal questions into the girl talk. Both were on the pill, and neither had married or had children. She made some notes in a new spreadsheet she kept on her laptop. She was beginning to form a plan. And there is a chapter break. Chapter 19, May 10. As the information about LM-245's course toward Earth was now public, the government had little choice except to come clean about Excalibur. The ship was robotic. A probe originally designed to intercept a comet the following year had been quickly retasked. The guts of the probe, guidance, telemetry, and a prototype ion drive became the heart of Excalibur. The rest was the Cold War relic left in a hangar at Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, an orbital platform holding 4 nuclear-tipped missiles. The 2 heavy lift launchers carried components of the probe. The first held the guidance, targeting, and telemetry systems from the Comet Interceptor. The second had the payload and boosters. There wasn't a big enough rocket in the world to loft the entire package into a transfer orbit, so it went up in sections and was mated robotically prior to the boosters blasting it out into deep space. On the morning of May 10th, the world awoke to the announcement by NASA that Excalibur was about to reach its target. There were lots of reports about NASA's and the United States government's optimism that the robotic asteroid killer would accomplish its mission. "The mission has 2 phases," the reporter explained, reading from papers provided by NASA. "The first stage is the kill mission, as NASA describes it. The probe has 4 modified Minuteman III missiles, each carrying 3 500-kiloton warheads. That's a total of 6 megatons of nuclear destruction aimed at an asteroid just 12 miles long. However, the speed of the target and the approaching missiles creates a challenging shot, even for the experts at NASA. The second phase is known as the diverter. The probe split 3 days ago. The original Comet Intercept component used its special prototype ion drive to slow as quickly as it could. It will, if necessary, fire its remaining rockets to bring it to the asteroid and land on the backside. Once there, it will again fire its engines and divert the asteroid from its probable impact with Earth. Experts say this is, by far, the most audacious part of the plan. It represents more of a last-ditch attempt than anything else. As the report progressed, NASA relayed telemetry from both the interceptor part of Excalibur, now more than 1 million miles from LM-245, and from the missile platform only 10,000 miles away and closing at hundreds of miles per second. "We're informed the missiles will launch any second," the reporter stated. This will occur in 3 parts. First, 1 missile will launch, aimed for a dead center impact. 10 seconds later, 2 more will launch, aimed to impact on one side. NASA hopes the blast will create a shift in the asteroid's course. Finally, the last missile will launch. It's hoped this final missile will only need to impact a large piece left after the first 3 explosions. For this reason, it won't launch until the last moment, 10 seconds prior to the platform encountering LM-245. "Jesus," Mindy said. Samantha and Alexis were there with her in her hotel room, along with a slightly older man named Jorge, who was on the inland logistics team. He moved equipment from the airport to the portal village. A month ago, he'd been driving trucks transporting nuclear fuel rods, so Mindy guessed he got this job because he already had clearance. "What?" Samantha asked, her hand spasmodically grasping and releasing the arm of the chair she sat in. "That last missile, just 10 seconds before impact, that's point-blank firing." "Yeah, but that's easy for NASA, yes?" asked Jorge. his accent becoming more pronounced as he got more nervous. They've never done something like this, Mindy reminded them. They all knew she was a space expert, which was why they were there. Most of the village teams who slept in their hotel were blissfully unaware of exactly what this event meant. On the screen, there was a flash, and the first missile flew away, momentarily whiting out the picture. Mindy could see the platform's reaction jets firing to counter the rocket's acceleration. There it goes, Alexis said, jumping off the couch and pointing. Go, baby, go! Mindy urged the missile under her breath. The image turned to the probe, still far away. The camera zoomed in enough for them to see the bright exhaust of the rocket as it boosted away. Mindy knew enough about the Minuteman III to tell that NASA had removed the first stage. They had designed it for liftoff, and the nozzles would not be optimal for deep space flight. The second stage only burned for 20 seconds, and after 10, the next two rockets launched simultaneously, one on each side of the platform. No more commentary came from her guests. Alexis remained standing. She had her left hand balled into a fist, and she was biting her thumb. Samantha balanced on the edge of the easy chair, her eyes wide and her mouth hanging slightly open. Jorge was on the couch and looked like he was watching a gripping TV show rather than a life and death live broadcast. Mindy sat on the bed, trying to remain calm, but filled with dread. Among those in her profession, there wasn't much doubt that something had diverted LM-245. Those who knew about the portals were aware the situation was more sinister than everyone else imagined. Opinions varied from competing aliens trying to kill or save humanity. Mindy tried to avoid guesses. Astronomers preferred facts, and those missiles were hard facts. The first impact and detonation should occur in seconds, the announcer said. The image from the platform went black, replaced by a NASA JPL logo. The camera on the platform has been intentionally shut off to avoid damage from the nuclear bomb's flash. The view from the probe returned. 3 little white pinpoints moved across the vast blackness of deep space. We'll let you listen to the feed from NASA. Alpha is on track, another voice said in that familiar, informative tone the NASA mission controllers always seem to have. Detonation in 3, 2, there was a brilliant flash as the first weapon detonated. We have a detonation, the controller said. The screen blanked out as the flash became too bright. We'll reacquire telemetry from the probe any second. Time passed. As soon as the image returned, there were 2 flashes and it was gone again. Secondary diverter weapons have detonated. Stand by, we are reviewing telemetry. The telemetry appeared on the screen. Mindy knew they'd show it because charts and graphs were reassuring to the public. However, unlike the public, she could understand a lot of the data. The central track was the asteroid's course. A blue line followed it with detonations marked to indicate effects. Multiple deviations existed as expected results. The track of the asteroid appeared completely unchanged. We have a lot of backscatter from debris, the NASA commentator reported. The TV anchorman quickly cut the feed. It appears NASA is saying the asteroid has been damaged. He stopped talking so the audience could hear the expert. We have confirmation of a debris cloud. T-minus 20 seconds to final launch. NASA determined the first 3 rockets were insufficient and are going to try one more time. The view returned to the probe. The picture was blurry with debris from 3 huge nuclear detonations. In the center was the asteroid, only it didn't look like it used to. It was now a gleaming point, reflecting the sunlight. We're not sure what the flashing is, the commentator continued. Perhaps the asteroid is on fire. In space? Jorge said with a laugh. Mindy nodded in agreement. The idea was ludicrous. The camera the probe was using to observe the asteroid changed, and a better view popped up. It centered on the platform with its sole remaining missile. On the screen in Mindy's room, it looked like a child's Lego spacecraft. NASA came back over the audio. T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, ignition. On the TV, the final Minuteman III ignited and streaked away from the platform. We have target acquisition. The camera flipped to the wider view. The asteroid was more visible, the debris cloud expanding in vacuum at an incredible rate. The missile impacts had transformed the asteroid. It looked like a gleaming wedge, or dart, slowly spinning. The sunlight seemed to scintillate on the surface. It had become something very different and imminently more sinister. What the fuck is it? Samantha asked. giving voice to what millions were wondering. Mindy opened her mouth to say something when there was a flash. It was like a green lightning bolt. A brilliant stutter of light connected the asteroid to the missile, which was only detectable by the glowing exhaust plume. There were half a dozen flashes in the space of a single heartbeat, and the missile became a rolling ball of fire. In an instant, the void quenched the explosion. Something appears to have happened, the commentator said. The green lightning flashed again, this time targeting the empty missile platform. It fell apart like a dandelion blown by a child, 1,000 pieces spinning away. Then the nearly expended booster motors fired for a split second. A moment later, NASA cut its feed and left the commentator staring at the camera, slack-jawed. We were waiting to get some indication of what we just saw from NASA. Did the asteroid shoot down that missile? Alexis asked. It isn't an asteroid, is it? Jorge said. They sat in silence for long moments while the anchorman made sad noises. Is it? Jorge pleaded. After a few moments, the special coverage ended and the network returned to a preempted morning talk show. The subject matter of the day was the high price of summer swimwear, and it was painfully obvious that the hosts were unaware of what had just happened. Chapter break.
Dorothy, we're not in Kansas.
Right?
That's not an asteroid, is it? It's a space station.
It's not.
Much to Mindy's surprise, no one wanted to talk about the morning's events on the way to work, or after they arrived either. Even her new friends Alexis and Samantha walked in a sullen silence, and as soon as they arrived, became completely engrossed in work that had only consumed a small percentage of their time the day before. Denial is the first stage, she thought, as they avoided her gaze. Mindy had more than enough to occupy her mind. She had only begun to learn about her new job, a boring operation which required her to acquire items and have them moved to various storage facilities on Manhattan. This left her, yes, please, a lot of time to do other things, such as analyzing numbers she'd seen on the Excalibur intercept hours before. The telemetry data chart stayed up until NASA cut their feed, so there was a lot of data there. She found images of it on the internet. The versions people had recorded and posted matched the numbers she memorized almost perfectly. Using that data, she created a profile of the asteroid's reactions to the 3 nuclear detonations. Nothing. That was the reaction. There hadn't been enough movement to register. It didn't surprise her that the head-on impact had no effect. In fact, she was amazed NASA had tried such a maneuver. It smacked of desperation, pure crazy, or both. By her estimates, hitting a 2-trillion-ton asteroid with a megaton of force placed perfectly only yielded a delta V of 0.4 to 0.5 meters per second. Even if they achieved the best scenario of 0.5 meters per second, it would take 2.5 months to change the point of impact by half a planetary diameter, changing a direct hit to a near miss. LM-245 was due to hit Earth in 11 days. It appeared that NASA had been trying for demolition, blow the asteroid into pieces and hope a lot of it burned up. But they hadn't known the composition of the asteroid before attacking it. She circled back to desperate or crazy. She was leaning toward the former. The biggest problem she had was not knowing what happened after they cut the feed. The nuclear assault was only the first part of their plan. The second part was landing the probe and using it to boost the asteroid. Asteroid, she said. That was the real issue. It wasn't an asteroid. It looked more like a needle, a dart, or an arrowhead. It was shiny, like liquid metal or polished steel. The connection to the portal was undeniable. The fact that NASA cut the feed was further validation. She considered sending an email to Osgood or Skinner, then decided against it as it probably wasn't a good move. All she could do was wait. Volant looked at the email he'd just received. Outside his command post in the camp, the sun was already below Central Park West. The sounds of sirens never went away now. The city was on a low boil, even with all traffic onto and off the island restricted to public transportation. Since the broadcast that morning, the entire nation was holding its breath. In times of crisis, the government usually made soothing announcements on the TV or radio. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I had the best wife ever. That's what I wanted to say.
Gotcha. Don't panic. Everything is under control. This time, there was utter silence. He hadn't seen Osgood or Skinner since yesterday. That's supposed to be Mindy, right? No, Volant, sorry. He hadn't seen Osgood or Skinner since yesterday. NASA had just face-planted in front of the entire world. Worse, they'd just televised what looked like humanity's first space battle, and it looked like mankind lost.
I love writing Volant.
The email contained 5 words. Operation Bifrost is a go. That was it then. There was no going back. He laughed and shut the laptop screen. He had stocked the little fridge in his trailer with ice-cold imported beer. He grabbed one, popped the top with a church key hanging on the fridge, and took a long swig. He savored the brew as it cooled his insides, taking a moment to enjoy the pleasure the simple act gave him. He knew there weren't going to be many more moments like this in the next 11 days. Here's to you, he said, raising the beer toward space. Here's to asteroids and fucking aliens. There was a tap on his door. Yeah? He asked. The door popped open and a junior agent stuck his head in. Director, NASA is having a press conference. Volant grunted, put the beer down, and grabbed the remote control on his desk. The agent closed the door as the TV came on. Volant didn't have to search for it. It was on every channel. A handsome middle-aged man was in the middle of his spiel, a huge monitor behind him showing blurry images from earlier that day. We can understand why the broadcasts from the Excalibur probe may have been confusing, even misleading to some. We've never photographed a live nuclear detonation in space, let alone multiple. Volant laughed out loud and took a drink. He admired the sheer gall it took to try and put the shit back in the horse after what 1 billion people saw just hours ago. The image behind the reporter changed, and the man pointed with a stylus. We've been analyzing the data, and we now believe what you are seeing is nickel iron from LM-245, which was flash melted by a nuclear detonation. Further, some very powerful gamma ray bursts were reflected back at the missile launching system. The screen showed the shiny object, though not nearly as clearly as before.
Yes. Yeah.
He remembered it had shape in the original broadcast. He'd thought it looked like a needle. The burst of highly energized radiation we saw likely triggered the detonation of the final Minuteman III's warhead. Volant finished his beer and dug out another. He wished he had some popcorn. What about the probe? He heard a reporter yelling over the din of the other reporters. Did it land on the asteroid as planned? Volant again admired the stagecraft underway. It was no accident the public could hear that reporter. Yes, the speaker said. The image changed to a highly pixelated view of a rocky, pocked, and strangely twisted alien landscape. The nuclear blasts generated a great deal of radiation, so we are having difficulty getting clear telemetry from the probe. However, we do know it landed and locked down, and is firing its engine. Will it succeed? Another voice managed to penetrate the cacophonous roar of the crowd. Can it save Earth? We believe there's a good chance. The initial detonations imparted more than 5 meters per second of delta V. That wasn't enough to push the asteroid off course sufficiently. However, with the additional thrust of the Excalibur probe's ion engine, we think we're going to make it. The unseen crowd of reporters loudly called out questions. Volant sipped his beer and listened, becoming increasingly certain there were no actual reporters present at the press conference. The man held up his hands and it got quiet far too quickly. We'll know more in 48 hours after we've observed the data and seen how LM-245 responds to the thrust. The image switched to an anchor woman in New York City who began her obligatory review of what they'd been listening to. Volant flicked the TV off and glanced at his computer. He had major concerns about whether this ploy would buy them a few hours. He knew there were multiple power bases that would make a play for the portal. He answered to one of those groups. NASA, under Skinner, represented another. Volant finished his second beer and opened his laptop to start sending emails. The object heading for Earth was a beautiful, fragile machine spinning faster and faster. He did not intend to be one of those who was here after it was all over, because it looked like there wouldn't be anything left. All right, there's a chapter break. Did you give the dogs their meds?
Yeah, when I fed them dinner.
Oh, okay. Got to check on the senior citizen dogs. Osgood finished the beer he'd been nursing while reading the reports from Houston. If anything, the filtered telemetry was much worse than what the world saw on TV. He shook his head, thinking about it. What fool considered it a good idea to televise live the most decisive event in human history? Even a 20-minute delay would have been enough. But no, they had to broadcast it live. As the report said, the probe was on the surface of LM-245 and thrusting at maximum output. For more than 12 hours, the prototype ion propulsion drive had pushed with considerable force, driven by the probe's nuclear power cell. What the televised report didn't say was that officials already knew the result of the probe's efforts. Nothing. The motor produced a steady, appreciable amount of thrust. Even at the largest estimates of the asteroid's weight, the probe should have imparted some measurable amount of delta V. But there was no sign of movement. How could it be worse? The nuclear weapons hadn't imparted any either. Several megatons of force, all direct hits, hadn't managed to shift the rock even 1/10 of a meter per second. He flipped to the data page and read the estimates. To have shown no response to the explosions, the asteroid would have had to weigh more than 100 trillion tons. The data page also had several high-definition false color images of the asteroid, or rather, what was inside the asteroid. Radar images of the debris showed the missiles had blown away billions of tons of rock, revealing the core. It looked like a top or a needle or any number of other things. Either. I don't care. None of those should have been inside an asteroid floating around the solar system since its creation. It was shiny, perfectly shaped, and ominous, especially since all those trillions of tons were in an object no more than a mile long and 800 to 1,000 feet wide. Neutronium, he said, surprising himself with a word that was nowhere in the report. No one at NASA would risk their career to suggest such a thing. Yet what else that small could weigh so much? He put aside the last of the report, the section that talked about the destruction of the platform. He concluded that the green flashes were high-energy lasers, or perhaps particle beams. Asteroid, he snorted. It wasn't a damn asteroid. We've been murdered, he said, putting the beer down and standing up to stretch. The sun was just setting outside. It was later than he thought. The light from inside the portal dome cast a circle across the metallic grating the army put down when the grass started turning to mud. He walked across to the dome, unconsciously holding up his pass for the 2 NSA agents to scan with their ID wands. They beeped, assuring the soldiers he was indeed who he appeared to be, and he passed inside. No one was in the dome. A couple of computer screens glowed with charts and graphs, and a plethora of empty cups and bowls on the tables were the sole signs that anyone had been there recently. Osgood crossed to just below the dais and looked at the pearly surface. Compared to the asteroid artifact, you are a simple mystery, he said. Of course you're linked. Only a fool would think otherwise. The portal remained silent. He grunted and walked over to glance at the computer display. It was another laser-reflective study on the dais. The materials team continued to doggedly try and understand the mechanisms of the portal. The dome wall, a few feet away, suddenly glowed, revealing his shadow. He jumped slightly and turned. The portal had sprung to life. That was impossible. All their tests proved it. Someone had to have stepped on the dais. Then someone walked around the perimeter of the portal and came into view. None of the bright lights were on, so he couldn't tell who it was. He could see a woman's figure, mostly obscured by a lab coat, her hair tied into a ponytail. The lab coat was black, and there were silver stripes running down both arms. It looked like a professional lab coat, but the material's colors were unlike anything he'd ever seen. "Excuse me," he said, and the figure turned, revealing a rather beautiful woman. For a second, he thought it was Mindy Patoy. They could have been sisters. He took a few steps toward the dais as she took a few toward the edge. As she stepped away from the glowing portal, he got a better view of her face. This woman was older than Mindy, probably in her 50s. She had graying red hair that had once been the color of burnished copper. Her eyes gave him pause. They were the brightest shade of jade green he'd ever seen. They had the haunted look of someone who'd seen too much and done far more than any one person ever should have. Now that she was closer, he could see she wore a one-piece uniform with a strange camouflage pattern under the coat. "Are you with the NSA?" he asked. She looked him up and down and weighing him. "I didn't see you when I came in." She finished looking at him and scanned the room, her eyes moving quickly, picking out details. "I don't see your identification." She turned away and walked back to the portal. "You need to be careful," he started to say, holding up a hand. Her movements struck him dumb. The woman held out a hand and touched the ethereal portal. He couldn't see her hand. but it appeared as if she twisted one of the symbols. The icon stopped moving, and his jaw dropped. She touched a second, then a third icon. The entire portal flashed green, not blue, and became a mirror instead of a portal to Bellatrix. Thank you. Can I have a couple of the gingerbread cookies as well, please?
They're up
Thank
there,
you.
aren't they?
No, they're right by the chicharrones.
You moved them.
Oh, maybe I did.
It's okay.
If Osgood had looked in the mirror, he'd have seen a middle-aged man, eyes wide, jaw hanging open. "What are you doing?" he asked. The woman didn't respond. Instead, she repositioned herself exactly in the center of the portal, reached across her body with her right hand to the left edge of the portal near the bottom, and touched it. The icon she touched pulsed, but she maintained contact and made a sweeping motion with her arm from left to right, tracing the edge of the portal. The symbol under her finger stuck there as if glued in place. The symbol left a glowing trail of white light that faded shortly after it passed. The woman dragged the icon around to the opposite side, where she slowed and carefully picked a spot before stopping. With a little twist, the symbol rotated and pulsed once more before she removed her finger, and the portal flashed green again. The symbols changed once more and resumed oscillating. She reached out again and tapped once, twice, thrice, each time on a different symbol. On the third one, the portal pulsed green and returned to its previous shade of white. The portal swirled from its mirror surface to show darkness. The woman examined the perimeter of the portal with a slow, deliberate sweep of her head in the opposite direction from which she moved her arm. Apparently liking what she saw, she nodded and put her hands on her hips. Osgood hissed in amazement, and she looked over her shoulder, fixing him with her piercing green eyes. "Who the hell are you?" he barked, his surprise taking on a slightly hysterical edge. She turned partly around and gave him a slightly lopsided grin before speaking. "Honestly, even if I told you, you'd never believe me." And with a wink, she stepped through the portal. "No!" he started to yell, and ridiculously reached out from 20 feet away, as if he could have physically restrained her. Of course, she was already on the other side. The light from the portal dome lit her dimly as she looked both ways and quickly descended the dais steps. In a moment, she was gone from view. "Oh, no," he said, and shambled up the steps. "I hope Wilson has somebody watching the portal. No, no, no," he kept repeating. He reached the top of the steps and looked through, trying to find her. There was no sign. It was almost completely dark. Sorry, I'm about to gag on snot.
That's sexy as shit.
Right? Super fun.
God.
He looked around for a flashlight or other portable light source. Nothing came to hand, so he grabbed one of the headsets sitting on the laser communicator and pressed the alert button, which would cause it to squawk loudly on the other side. Nothing happened. He looked down at the communicator and its tripod, wondering if the strange woman had moved it. He was about to look for the laser transceiver on the other side when the portal dimmed. He blinked in confusion. It hadn't been 10 minutes, not even close. Osgood turned and began walking down the steps. He stopped just before reaching the bottom when he realized something was wrong. It took him a long second to realize what it was. The ring of glowing lights around the perimeter of the portal weren't lit. None of the 144 lights that had been there only minutes ago were glowing. "Oh, fuck," he said, and ran to the nearest phone. There's a chapter break.
With the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes.
Right?
This is a major diversion from the original book also.
By the pricking of my thumbs.
You know what I said?
No, you said with.
Oh. Alright, that's enough. I refilled their Cheerio thing.
I see that. Thank you.
After all, they're not nearly spoiled enough.
These two can never be spoiled enough.
Tell them their favorite treat.
Our little girl's, their favorite treat right now is Cheerios.
No, like carrots.
Well, carrots and then Cheerios. Chapter 20, May 11th. Not crowded since shortly before they built it. Osgood had to banish dozens of people, regardless of their position, to give those who needed to be there room to work. Every team was running tests, all of which confirmed nothing substantial had changed. However, lots of unsubstantial things had. As Osgood had noticed, the lights were no longer lit. No trace of their existence remained. The portal still popped up when someone stepped on the dais, though it only stayed there for 2 minutes. The symbols flashed and changed just as before. A dozen men and women were analyzing the strange woman's movements on a pair of high-definition images projected on a blank section of portal wall. As he was a witness to the event, the NSA grilled Osgood for more than 2 hours. They were still questioning the guards. He knew the strange woman's appearance wasn't their fault. The camera covering the door didn't show her arrival. However, neither did the camera covering the side of the portal facing the communicator. A review of the footage showed the portal coming on by itself, and 8 seconds later, the woman walking around from the far side. According to Occam's razor, there was only one possible conclusion. The woman had arrived through the portal. The soldiers on Bellatrix had stated dozens of times that was impossible. The device only went one way, yet there she was. The cameras captured perfect facial images, both from the front and in profile. They could find no match in any government database. Osgood, slightly suspicious, checked the images against Mindy Patoy's, whom the woman resembled. Results showed a 79% match. Plus, the young astronomer had been in her hotel room a half-mile away under lockdown when the event happened. Yeah. Whoever she was knew far more about the portals than anyone on Earth. Portal camera and light rig are ready, a tech announced. Good, Osgood said. Let's find out what's going on over there. After activating the portal and confirming it only stayed open for 2 minutes, they'd confirmed the laser transceiver was missing from Bellatrix's side. Osgood had a deep sense of foreboding about what they'd find. A man holding a high-speed digital camera mated to multiple directional LED lights quickly mounted the dais and approached the dark portal. He shouldered the rig and activated the camera and light. Brilliant illumination flooded through the portal, none reaching the back wall of the dome. That much hadn't changed, at least. I can see detail, the man said. Put it on the projector, Osgood barked, pointing to one of the big wall projectors frozen on the strange woman's face. The image switched to the camera view, which showed a pattern of white broken by horizontal gray lines. The operator panned around, and occasional vertical lines broke the pattern, though only between 2 lines, never proceeding. Pull back, Osgood ordered, and the man did. Further back, the pattern made more sense. It was bricks. They saw a brick wall as the view panned as far as it could to the left. To the right, the wall went away before turning to make a second wall. Up, Osgood urged. Quickly now, you're almost out of time. The man pointed the camera upward to show beams and stone or a concrete ceiling. The beams looked corroded in places, and there were cracks in the roofing. Looks old, someone said. After a few seconds more, the portal went out. Osgood cursed. The 2-minute time limit sucked. So it's true, he heard the familiar voice of Agent Mark Bullitt. Someone broke through security and fucked up the portal? In a manner of speaking, Osgood said, waiting impatiently while the man with the camera clambered off the dais, then back on to restart the portal. He explained to the NSA agent what had changed. How are our people over there? Bullitt asked. We have to assume they're still there, Osgood replied. The images coming from the portal distracted him. Not much was visible of the floor. It looked like the portal was in a room slightly larger than the dais. They certainly couldn't see a forest grove anymore, and there was no sign of the military people who'd gone over. Damn it, he thought. What did that woman do? What now? Osgood glanced at the man. His body language was skeptical. We send someone over, Osgood said. Is that smart? You'd rather sit here and wait for the killer lawn dart? Bullitt narrowed his eyes and considered his answer. Osgood decided he had better things to do. Bullitt had spent most of the morning trying to write a report for his superior about what he'd seen. In charge of the security side of the operation, he'd gotten the image files immediately from the Portal Dome server. Like Osgood, he thought the woman looked like Mindy Patoy. He'd sent a pair of agents to verify that the woman was in her room. The security bugs confirmed she'd been sitting on the couch, working on her computer, and the tap on her internet access showed nothing unusual. She'd been reading accounts of the survivors closest to the New Delhi explosion and something about global temperatures dropping by a degree. Bullitt didn't care. He knew it wouldn't matter, even in the short term. Still, a nagging suspicion lingered in the back of his mind. Could NASA be playing a game? He wondered aloud. Volant's director was livid, as was whoever sat above him. After the Excalibur fiasco, a lot of powerful people were lining up to come to New York, a visit that was now in limbo. He was completely behind the idea of sending someone to the other side to see what was going on. It was an easy way to validate the scientist's story. Had the portal moved? Where on that alien world was the portal now? Was it close enough to resume operations? He'd advised waiting to see what happened. The others didn't agree with him, but he had broad discretionary powers from the director. His report completed, he returned to the portal dome. An hour later, a soldier trained in reconnaissance and survival was ready and waiting just off the dais. His pack wasn't nearly as humongous as the one carried by Steve Edwin, and he carried an M4 carbine with a full load of ammo in one hand and another laser transceiver in the other. The transceiver was an improvement over the previous one, with better instruments. He wore a headset under his hat. The name patch on his uniform said Wells, and he had First Sergeant stripes velcroed to his sleeve. Tim, he said, shaking Osgood's hand, I understand there's some question about the destination. Osgood nodded and explained the situation. The soldier listened attentively, nodding his head in places. Okay, got it, he said when the scientist finished. You still good with going? The man looked down at the U.S. Army logo embroidered on his chest and tapped the emblem with a gloved hand. This doesn't come without risks. Osgood gestured toward the portal, and First Sergeant Tim Wells mounted the dais. The handling team moved into place, and he stepped through. He put the laser transceiver down, aiming it at the one on Earth before moving clear. The handling team maneuvered to the front of the portal, picked up a crate, and let it fly. With a resounding clang, the crate rebounded from the portal and clattered across the dais and down the stairs, coming to rest next to Osgood, who looked down at it with a mixture of surprise and amazement. Well, that never happened before, he thought as he activated the headset. Are you okay? He asked through the laser. Yeah, came Tim's reply. I guess no extra supplies, huh? Osgood shrugged. It was all he could think to do. The air has a strange, sharp smell here. Osgood cast a questioning look at one of his science team to see if they had heard that before. He knew they hadn't, as all previous reports said Bellatrix smelled like the California redwood forests with a hint of cinnamon. They shook their heads, confirming what he already knew. Okay, Osgood said, look around and get back to us as soon as you can. On the other world, the man nodded. Next contact in 20 minutes. The man looked down at his watch, gave a thumbs up, and turned and stepped down from the dais. The portal deactivated at exactly 2 minutes. The science team began analyzing the data from the sensors to the laser station the sergeant took with him. From the sensors on the laser station the sergeant took with him. What do you have? He asked them, walking over. It's not the same planet, the team leader concluded and began listing items. The temperature's considerably higher, humidity is almost non-existent, oxygen is 26% lower, and carbon dioxide is 10% higher. There's a lot of argon, and background radiation is 200% higher. Osgood's eyes widened. The radiation detector can't tell if it's ionizing radiation. Out of view, Volant scowled. What's the probability of using this planet anyway? He asked. The team consulted each other, and one after another shook their heads. None, the leader summed up for him. There are too many strikes against it. If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say the planet is at least partly sterile, maybe from a nuclear war. Guess that place is off the list, Volant said, turning to leave. What do you want us to do? Osgood asked him out of frustration. Fix it if you can, he growled as he left. I need to make another report. Osgood stared after him in anger. I hate that man. 5 minutes later, Osgood met with Skinner and explained the situation. There has to be a solution, Skinner said, watching the video of the mystery woman on his laptop. He'd been in the middle of non-stop planning meetings until the wheels came off a few hours ago.